So I think the thing that's going to edify a lot of people that are listening to this. First of all, people need to understand that their kids are at risk, because I've talked to so many people, Christians, loving Christians, people who love other people as they're sharing the gospel regularly, have no idea that marriage is unenforceable,
It
that
really
it can
isn't.
be unilaterally torn away from you. Why is
Right.
that a problem, Jeff?
That's a huge problem because, even if you have a marriage covenant, there are some states that have covenant marriages. But the problem is not the covenant marriage necessarily, or the marriage vows that we take before God. Why should a state be able to invalidate my vows to God and my wife's vows to God that we mutually made in the presence of many witnesses before God Himself? And the state says, oh, you know what, one of you wants out of it, that's okay. That is destructive. And actually, if you go back historically, this is something that if you go back to the 1840s, Marx and Engels wrote about the abolition of the family. Lenin came to power and he enforced that in Bolshevik Russia. He took marriage as being an ordinance from the church and made it a civil institution. And therefore, if it's a civil institution, the civil state can now rewrite the laws of marriage. And that's where divorce on demand started, at least in the 20th century, in 1917, 1918. It was so horrific what happened to society that in July of 1926, the Atlantic magazine, that bastion of conservatism, right, wrote an article called "The Russian Effort to Abolish Marriage." And what they were talking about is 8 years into no-fault divorce, the results were so devastating that they were talking amongst themselves, what do we do? And I mean, abortions were skyrocketing. They didn't really have abortions as much like that. And then it was just so many things that Stalin eventually had to reverse some of these policies because the communist society had no raw material to work with as far as what the kids are concerned. And we've seen that in our own society. 55 years plus of no-fault divorce. And people blame Reagan. And I don't know if that's 100% accurate. Yes, he signed it, but remember, the people that were telling him to sign no-fault divorce into legislation, they were lying to him. The entire divorce industry thrives on lies. They thrive on exploitation. They thrive on the destruction of the family. And they also thrive on the destruction of religious vows. So I've said that, obviously Marx, Engels, Lenin, they were very atheistic and stuff like that. They were a big influence here. But the other influence that we don't think about is Alfred Kinsey and Keynesian sexual revolution. So you have communism, totalitarianism that wants to destroy the family, want to destroy the family, destroy society, destroy the family, destroy society, and then you can reshape it into communism. But they forgot, well, I have no raw materials to work with, right? But then also Alfred Kinsey, sexual pleasures above everything. He was a pervert, sexual pervert. He did his studies that should be completely discredited. We have this so-called Keynesian science, which should be eliminated. In fact, there are some people that are trying to get laws that are based on Kinsey eliminated. But what he also did too, he was trying to advocate against marriage. So we have two strong cultural forces. Remember, Satan does not come as an evil person a lot of times. He comes as an angel of light, and then sexual freedom. You're being oppressed, and you're going to have this freedom. They dangle the carrot in front of you, but it has created devastation in our society. So between Marx, Engels, Lenin, and then Alfred Kinsey, the sexual revolution, and the church being silenced or silencing its own voice. Jesus is very explicit about no-fault divorce. Lord, can we divorce our wives for any reason, for no reason whatsoever? No. From the very beginning, it was not done this way. God created man and woman. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. The two shall become one. What therefore God has joined together, let no man tear asunder. And not no man, no state, no court, no judge. And we have Christian judges say, well, I can't do anything. What can I do? Well, you could stand up. You could be a Christian. And you could also be a pastors that don't talk about this. We have to call divorce sin. It's listed in the Sermon on the Mount, for crying out loud. Jesus is talking about divorce on the Sermon on the Mount. After murder and adultery comes divorce. So
Right.
we have underestimated, we have not preached against the evilness of this. And when we have a way to get out of something, we tend to use it rather than work through things.
Wow. Can I add to that? Malachi chapter 2, verses 13 to 18.
Absolutely.
And this second thing you do, you cover the Lord's altar with tears, with weeping and groaning, because he no longer regards the offering or accepts it with favor from your hand. But you say, Why does he not? Because the Lord was witness between you and the wife of your youth, to whom you have been faithless, though she is your companion and your wife by covenant. Did he not make them one with a portion of the Spirit in their union? And what was the one God seeking? Godly offspring. So guard yourselves in your spirit, and let none of you be faithless to the wife of your youth.
Amen.
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 And that's the lack of enforcement, the lack of ability to enforce that is the problem.
And
Right?
Joe, let me add something else here too, because in the Jewish culture, Old Testament, a wife was not allowed to file for divorce legally. That's why it's written to men: "Do not divorce the wife of your youth." So and now this women's equality movement, in order to make things equal, it's not telling people, husbands, men, honor your covenant vows. What we've tried to say is now women can do it to men. That's so we have now equalized sinfulness, and that's the idea. Well, we have to give women equal rights. And the thing is that if there's a whole lot of issues with this thing here. I was listening to this Jewish lady said, well, if you don't want to get rid of no fault divorce, you should all become Jewish, because in the Jewish religion, only a man's allowed to divorce the wife.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the thing is, even I don't know if it still works that way in the Jewish religion or not, because the state has basically said anybody for any reason, for no reason, you can make up a reason. Perjury is rampant in family court. All you have to do is allege insupportability. No facts are needed. In fact, in our Texas family code, that's what it says. Without regard, basically no facts are necessary. All you have to do is allege insupportability. Nobody knows what it means. There's discord or conflict of personality such that the legitimate ends of the marital relationship cannot be achieved. What does that mean? Nobody knows. Actually, that's a religious determination or an ideological determination, which is one reason why this one justice back in 2001 said there is no possible way to reconcile the statute with our Texas Constitution and Texas jurisprudence. So marriage is created by God, and that's what we have in our case law, ordained by God. And yet the state looks at it in a Marxist Keynesian viewpoint, like it's just a temporary contract. We have redefined marriage. We always talk about, same-sex marriage. We redefine marriage by saying marriage is okay to be temporary. Marriage is
dating.
permanent.
It's just dating.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's dating. And we're sending people into date.